This is the YOB ConvoCast, one-on-one conversations with your other brother's authors, community members, supporters, and friends.
When I'm with you, I feel like I'm already home. When I'm with you, I'm right where I belong. I'm already home.
What's up, friends, and welcome back to the YOB ConvoCast conversations with our international community. We've got people all over the place. My name is Tom. I'm the editor, co-founder of YOB, and we're a community navigating faith, homosexuality, and masculinity together. And we are in the middle of this at-home series. Really not the middle anymore. We are in the final stretches of this at-home series, exploring how our living situations and life stages impact our journeys with faith, sexuality, and masculinity. And I love it sometimes when I put out those sparrow signals. You guys, sometimes you might hear me say I put the sparrow signal out in the sky and wait and hope that someone sees it. But I put it out to our community some weeks ago that I really think it would be cool if we had somebody who lives with a sibling. If there's just like a sibling living situation out there amongst our community members, among other possibilities, to reach out to me and let's see if we could do an episode. And so I'm delighted that this person reached out. He's been in our community for a few years now. I've gotten to meet him pretty regular on our Zoom calls as well, and has the bonus, I think this is an accurate statement, of being our first native-born Canadian on this podcast. My other brother, Ryan, making his first time on the show. What's up, Ryan?
Hey, Tom. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good to have you. Thanks for reaching out. I'm excited to talk to you, hang out with you on this call. It's always been fun to get to connect with you. Why don't you tell our listeners who are meeting you for the first time just a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am a late 40s Canadian. I reside in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. My mom is an American. My dad was Canadian. They met studying while at Bible college here in the Vancouver area many eons ago, and was raised in a loving Christian household, and realized upon puberty that, oh, I'm not straight, and went on a journey of more suppressing those questions. And in 2020, in the midst of asking God and clergy and friends a lot of questions regarding faith and sexuality, I stumbled upon the YOB community. And so proud to have been here. It was August 2020 that I joined, so 4 years now. Time has really flown by. And keep myself busy Monday to Friday as an office manager, and love participating in those Zoom calls when I can with the group.
Yeah, I love Vancouver. It's one of my favorite Canadian cities. I've only been there once, and I long to return there and go back again because I had a great time. The one time that I was there, it was a beautiful city. I always love it. I make fun of you for it, but it's all in good spirits because whenever you join our calls, it's just by the nature of when we have our calls, which is focused on the East Coast. So a lot of times, not just you, but a lot of West Coasters are just getting off work or are just in transition of going from work to home at that end part of the afternoon, early evening. And so you're always chiming in on our Zoom calls from subways and trains and walking across streets. And I just love your commitment level to join in on the community. It's always a joy. It's always a joy to have you all the way from Vancouver.
Well, it's always a joy to be joining these calls. And I guess I wasn't cognizant of other people noticing my background until I was thrown into the YOB voting system earlier this year. So that gave me a good chuckle. That's
right. We always like to have a little inside joke YOB bracket every year with our community. And so glad we could throw you in there. I remember we hung out, gosh, when was that now? It's been a couple of years in the Seattle area. There's this coffee shop that I love that's in Bellingham, Washington, which is north of Seattle. And it overlooks, like, I don't know what body of water that is, like some some like inlet, some connection to Puget Sound. It's like somewhere way up there. My geography is probably way off, but I know it's not the Pacific Ocean. It's not the Pacific Ocean, but it's close. But this coffee shop just sits there, and you can just look out at the water, and all these sailboats go past. I've been there a couple times now, and so I remember we got to connect there one time when I was traveling out on the West Coast, and it was so delightful. So great to connect with you and meet you in person back then.
Yeah, I was recalling meeting you with some friends recently, and I think that was probably a little over 2 years ago. And I said it was Tom, somebody from the other side of North America, that introduced me to this beautiful little coffee shop down by the ocean. And to think that this place is only an hour from where I live, and it took you to introduce me to it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and name drop it. The Woods Coffee. I expect to be reimbursed by the Woods for all the dozens of people who will be rushing there. But no, if you're ever in Bellingham, Washington, go to the Woods Coffee Shop. They have a bunch of locations, so you got to go to the one that's on the water. It should be very obvious if you research it. So it's one of my favorite coffee shops in America. I look forward to going back there, but also to visit across the border as well. Like I said, to go to Vancouver for the second time and explore lots more there. I look forward to that day. I feel like it'll be here before too long.
Yeah,
I look forward to it.
I look forward to showing you around Vancouver, and then where I actually own a house with my brother outside the city. So both are very different places, but very beautiful at the same time.
Yeah. Let's jump right into it, Ryan, because you live with your brother, which I am excited to learn about. You mentioned you're in your late 40s, good old Gen X representation. We love our Gen Xers out there. Tell us about that. Tell us about living with your brother. How long has that been going on? What's the vibe? How did that come to be?
I would say this started with my journey with God, locked up during the pandemic. And I had just recently gone through multi-layers of grief in losing my father, ending a long-term relationship with a guy, and finally realizing that life wasn't good in that moment. And I started calling out to God to show me his will and his way forward, and which involved me deciding to pursue celibacy moving forward, summer 2020. And hence, yes, I met the YOB community and started finding out about different ways that people can live this path moving forward, especially having come out of a long-term relationship with a guy. I was asking God a lot of questions, like how, like in practical sense, God, how am I supposed to do this? I very much love my independence. And I think, especially after getting my ex out of the household and having it to myself, that God used that in a very specific way to get my attention. I don't think I would have had such a dramatic and honestly miraculous experience with God locked up during the pandemic had I even had a single other person in that household. It was him that rescued my sanity. But getting back to how that leads to like my housing situation, that summer of 2020, I couldn't get across the border anymore, which was killing me because the Canada-US border is only 45 minutes from the city. And I was just always used to just traveling wherever I wanted to. And the pandemic forced me to start traveling a lot more in my own backyard in beautiful British Columbia. And I went on a camping trip, woke up in the morning, and it was so hard in the beginning of the pandemic to even find camping spots you could book. It was just crazy times because we were all kind of being locked down. And so I was only able to get a camping spot on the Sunday night, wake up in the morning, and I'm like, okay. So it was a little north of this city called Whistler, which is like 2 hours north of Vancouver, where our Olympics were co-held there. I get up and I'm like, I can either drive 2.5 hours south, or I can take the long way home and pass through the Fraser Valley, which is where my mother lives. And I mean, that's going to be at least twice as long. But like, hey, I have nothing else to do today. I got the day off work and may as well take a road trip. Where that led is driving up into the mountains, and I like the journey just continued to get more and more beautiful. Like my breath was being taken away, and like I truly feel, and I know that it was God that was prompting me to go the long way home. And as I'm coming down this hill into this dry and yet gorgeous hot valley, they gave me the vibes of places that I love in the American Southwest, this town called Lillooet. And I remember just saying out loud, I'm going to move here someday. And little did I know that God was already working to make that happen. And fast forward a little bit, a little over a year later, so it's now 2021, an opportunity came for my brother, my youngest brother, and I to live together in a townhouse that my parents owned in the community that my mother lives in. And neither of us wanted to be there in the long run. And I thought like that was my first thought of moving in with my brother. And I feel bad of saying this now, but it was like, ew, like I don't want to move. Sorry.
Shout out to Ryan's brother if he's listening.
Love you. But it was like, no, I don't want to live with someone together again. Like, forget about that. And yeah, so like we assisted my mother in the sale of that. But then she also was kind of prompting me, like, what's going to happen when I'm gone, Ryan? Now that you're kind of looking out the rest of your siblings and their kids, like, where are you and your youngest brother, what's going to happen with that? And so I had a chat with my brother and threw the idea out a little nervously, like, hey, do you actually want to look at getting a property together in this town called Lillooet, I've discovered? And we went a bit house hunting, and it was by the grace of God, we had already made an offer on a house that it fell through. There was so much shadiness with that deal, and God protected us and helped us dodge a bullet on that one. But we ended up buying this house together. It's on 2.5 acres. It's beautiful, fully furnished 2-level home with an unfinished basement. He has his master bedroom with an ensuite bathroom, with ensuite bathroom on the main floor. And then basically I have the upstairs floor with a guest room there so that when we have guests over, we can host them. And specifically the last 2 summers with my job occupation situation changing, it afforded me a lot more time to be up there. And so the previous 2 summers, essentially I was living there the whole time. The challenge with staying there in the long term right now is it's mountain roads to get to and from the city out to the house. And after a certain time of year, you need special tires. And
Right.
I don't have the money for that right now. But yeah, I began thinking, which helped, like, led me to this position where I now own this house with them. Yeah, I want to do life in the long term with somebody who I love and know and happen to be a biological brother. I think I kept resisting it so much at the beginning because it's not common, I think very common on side B to find scenarios like this, and I really couldn't relate to a lot of the other, I guess, situations. So while right now I do have a house with my brother, it is part-time that we share living together. And then I do have my job in the city. And so I go back out to Lillooet and live together with him as often as I can, work remotely when I can. but the other half is, I guess, until I retire, which honestly, life creeps up on me so quickly before I know it. I will be at retirement age. And my intention is to leave the city for good once I retire and live with my brother full time.
Gotcha. Do you have a place in the city that you stay in there in Vancouver?
Yes. So I do have an apartment in downtown Vancouver.
Okay.
I've had that since 1998. It's the only way, honestly.
That's a long time.
The only way I can afford to live in Vancouver is thankfully due to the price controls, and I've just dug in my heels the longest. Otherwise, if I were to pay current Vancouver market rents, it would be at least triple what I'm paying right now. And
wow,
I'd have to leave the city for good.
Tell me about your brother then, because I'm very intrigued by this living situation. I also love the name of the town where you live. It sounds out of a fairy tale, Lillooet. Like that just sounds like it's out of a fairy tale. It sounds beautiful. So yeah, so did you say your brother's younger than you?
Yes.
How much younger?
4 years younger than me.
4 years younger. Okay. So any romantic prospects for him? Any potential that he would want to move out or get a wife or start a family or anything like that? Has that conversation come up with you guys?
Explicitly, no. And yet kind of in like roundabout vague ways, we've kind of touched base on relationships or the potentialness. And like, he's kind of made it clear, like he's never had any proactive intention of dating anyone. And
okay.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that I wouldn't have moved, even if he's like my biological brother, I wouldn't have moved in with him if I didn't have some sort of like the most important thing to me was the spiritual connection, that he's in a different denomination than I, and we have our strong theological differences at times. And yet I know that we're both pursuing God in our walks in life. And yeah, I think it was knowing that he's the one sibling, kind of like myself, that is open to just long-term singleness, but then trying to figure out, how do I walk with God and honor God and yet still have my physical long-term needs met with the hands and feet of a fellow believer?
Yeah. Yeah. And even as I ask that question, I feel very self-conscious about it because I'm like, I presume that your brother is a straight man. Maybe this is wrong of me to presume this, but then the follow-up to that, okay, I was like, okay, if your brother is straight, why is that my first question and probably a lot of people's first question of like, so when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? Because I feel like so many people in our community have heard that for years and years and years, as if being single means you are incomplete and you need to find somebody to like complete yourself and level up to the next phase of existence. And so I hate that that's like the connotation. That's how I'm like self-analyzing my question that I just asked you. But I think it's beautiful that you guys can share space together, whether, that he's not incomplete, you're not incomplete just because you're not having a wife and kids, and that you can share space together as family. Like that is really beautiful. I'm really happy for you. And I want to learn. So I want to learn then. You guys are in your 40s. Let's go back to when you were like in your 4s, in your 5s, in your 6s. Like, so like, what was growing up with this brother like? Like, do you see a difference? Do you see an evolution? Like, what was your home life like growing up with him and anyone else for that matter, but particularly with him?
That's a great question. You know, as you're asking that, it's giving me like a flood of different memories and ideas in my mind. I think because like I have an older brother, 2 younger brothers, and a youngest sister.
Okay.
Being the second child and the second of the sons, I always, I think emotionally, now in retrospect, think about it, I emotionally was always closest to my youngest brother, almost wanting to be his like protector, older brother or something. It was the child number 1 and child number 3. So the 2 brothers I'm sandwiched between on the family tree. those two, now when I think about it in retrospect, I looked up to as like your perfect men, your perfect virtue of like youth masculinity. They were the ones that were chasing after girls, dating girls. They both got straight A's, and in my mind, seemingly not trying for it. And like I had to bust.
That was me.
Thanks, Tom.
A's are so easy, y'all.
Well, I had to work my butt off, but like except for the two languages of English and French, which I got B's in my senior year, the rest were A's, but it required a lot of work. But yeah, I'm like, I know that both me and my youngest brother, we always, again, thinking about this in retrospect, always seemed to kind of struggle to keep up with the two brothers that were older than us, the ones that were chasing after girls. And yeah, I think now in retrospect, that helped with an emotional connection with my youngest brother of like, okay, we're not the same, we're different, and yet I see my similarities with you as a brother.
I love that. I mean, I resonate with the protector role as well, because I'm the oldest of three in my family, and I definitely felt that. Probably, I mean, honestly, with both my brother and my sister, I have one of each, but I specifically remember it with my sister because I'm just a year older than her, and just wanting to look out for her, make sure no one's bullying her, make sure, just always keeping an eye on her whenever I was elsewhere, like on the school bus or at recess or anything like that. And I think that's a beautiful bond that you can have with a sibling when you just want to make sure they're okay and rally behind. I love that you have that synergy with your one brother compared to your other two. That's interesting to me. Anything else you want to share about your home life? I'm curious about your climate. Like, did you grow up in a Christian home? What was like the culture of your family?
Yeah, we grew up going to, well, the denomination is Mennonite Brethren, so they're kind of like similar to Baptist or evangelical churches growing up. And we also went to Reformed Christian schools at the same time. So, I mean, that's a whole other issue of like learning a very similar yet different theology Monday to Friday and then on Sundays, and where that kind of led me on a faith journey. But yeah, we were brought up in a very loving Christian household. Still to this day, like, especially now that I don't have my father here on this side of eternity, I admire the fact of how much my parents loved each other into that very last dying breath of my father's. And what an example he left, I think, for the rest of the family. And yet, as much as that's beautiful, that's not the story that God wrote for my life, to like be married and have children like he did. And yeah, shortly before he left, I remember him being in the hospital and saying to him, you know, Dad, if I were married, if I were living out yours and Mom's dream for myself, and I were married right now, I wouldn't be here in the hospital with you 6 out of every 7 days at your side, praying with you, talking to you, helping you. And like his eyes widened and he nodded, and it's like he got it finally. Because I do recall growing up as well, it wasn't just from my family. It was the school I was going to. It was the churches I was going to. It was the media content that evangelical Christianity put out in the 80s and 90s. But like there was a lot of pressure to like, this is the cookie cutter approach for every Christian that is brought up in this system, is like, you get to puberty, you start dating girls, don't kiss them beforehand. But then in your wedding night, you have this like romantic, like, fireworks show kiss, and then you have your wedded bliss thereafter. And it is beautiful for people that find that. But I think the further away we move from that moment of church history of the apex of purity culture, realized that that wasn't really God's will for a lot of people's lives. And I'm glad we've moved beyond that. And I was happy that my father was able to realize that God does have a plan in store for me, in spite of the fact that I don't have a wife, that I don't have biological children, and that it put me actually in a unique space in the long run to help look out for the rest of my family members. And we had long conversations about that. And I'm honestly just trying to do my best in fulfilling those vows to him of looking out for the rest of my family. And yet in the process, God has so richly blessed me. I mean, I never in a million years would have thought of having this beautiful house out in the countryside with a brother, and finally relieving the anxiety of wondering, like, where am I going to be in my final retirement days? Like, and who's going to be there that is like, has my back? And to think that in just submitting myself to God and following him, that he's led me on this journey, that thinking 5 years ago that there was no purpose to continue to move forward. And now I see the goodness of God in being richly blessed in, just where I'm at with particularly that brother, my mother, and alleviating that anxiety about what my retirement days may look like.
Yeah, man, that's really, really cool to hear about. Thanks for sharing a little bit about your father and about that, just the expectations of what life could look like. You mentioned some theological differences or some different beliefs, denominational differences. Like, that seems like that could be a challenge. And feel free to share more about that. But yeah, do any other limits or any other challenges come to mind? And then along with that, I wanted to ask you, so like, I'm assuming then that your brother knows about your sexuality, and I'm curious if that's part of the theological differences or if that's just a completely unrelated matter.
Such a great question, and why I'm not going to be running out and sharing this podcast proactively with my brother.
Gotcha.
So basically, the members of my family that I voluntarily, although reluctantly, came out to my family members, it was first of all my sister, my youngest sibling, and then my two parents. At different times, through different means, my sister then took it upon herself to tell parts of my stories to my other three brothers, which, there's still a bit of soreness in regards to that. So at a high level, yes, my brother knows, but we've never really gotten into that. That being said, I know that his theological views are definitely not affirming. And I perhaps don't take as much of a dogmatic outlook on some of his views when it comes to sexuality. But that's also not a breaking point, because it's coming out of a place of love. And I think that's the most important things when we're discussing this is even when we're, that intersection of faith and sexuality, to even when we don't agree with each other, to approach it out of a place of love and being able to respect each other, even if we aren't going to agree on it. Some of the great things I would say that I've appreciated about my brother, especially when I'm up there in Lillooet with him, is he does often come along with me to the Sunday church service that I attend in town. It's like, it's a denomination, but it's more or less like non-denominational, cute little community where super loving, which is different than the church he attends on the Sabbath on Saturdays. And I've never gone along with him to his church. I have visited Seventh-day Adventist churches in the past. But that's more his outlook on life. I would say then our biggest I won't even want to call it conflict. Our biggest disagreement so far, like we've had this place since 2021 together. So 3 years into this, comes down to, in my point of view, legalism when it comes to what one can or cannot do on the Sabbath. And I don't want to sound petty or anything, but it involves things like maybe if you have a problem doing dishes on the Sabbath, don't leave a week's worth of dishes on the counter before the Sabbath starts. That's all I'm going to say on that issue.
Slam. Yeah, I'm all for not doing chores on the Sabbath, but also, yeah, maybe clean up the night before. Maybe that's probably a reasonable, especially if you're going to share a space with somebody. Like, yeah, that would be. I think that's a reasonable response. Yeah. I used to share space with somebody who had maybe not as hardline views on the Sabbath, but maybe, I don't know. And so that was interesting because I just had to be mindful of what was in what we were doing. He was also kosher, and there was like fridge considerations about like what was in the fridge or separate fridge spaces or that sort of thing too. So, just trying to find the line of like being respectful of someone's different beliefs, but then also how do you make that work in a shared living situation? It could be challenging at times. So thank you for sharing some of those with me. Any other joys? Yeah. Any other joys come to mind?
Yeah. Lillooet is such a breathtakingly beautiful corner of the earth. Like the whole town is surrounded by mountains all around you. And there's this gorgeous, like turquoise colored lake that is so refreshing on those scorching hot, dry summer days. And so, yeah, we've been able to go down to the lake and just like enjoy each other's company. We'll occasionally watch a movie together. I'd say the most interactions I have with my brother when I'm up out of the city is I love to cook, and we both enjoy eating. So that makes for some good times, because I find myself when I'm alone in the city, it's more like hunter-gatherer. I'm eating to just like fuel the body and not
just to survive.
Yeah, not to
enjoy.
I don't get a lot of satisfaction or enjoyment out of it. And when I know I'm cooking for not just me, like I go a million times harder to not screw it up, to make it taste good, and to put a lot of love into what I'm doing. And it's really, I think, far too much now in the current days. I find it's happening less and less often that families get together, or like just people come together for home cooked meal. And I think one of the blessings that has happened that has extended just beyond my brother and I enjoying a good meal together is my sister also ended up moving to Lillooet, and she, depending on which kids she has in her care at any given time, I enjoy inviting my nephews over for dinner as well. And
nice.
Yeah, it's always fun. Like, I couldn't call my brother a gunkle, but like, it's
a strunkle.
Yeah, a strunkle. These kids have a strunkle and gunkle.
Strunkle and gunkle from Lillooet. That is a fairy tale right there.
Oh yeah, I honestly have so much fun spending time with my nephews, and I know my brother. It's just him. He's had like the kids over, and I think especially because without divulging too much info, like their father situation is far from ideal, and I remember the conversations I had with my dad that he specifically had worries about what's going to happen with my sister's kids, because I think he was looking out for them. And I just feel honored now that not just me, but both me and my brother can play a bigger role in these kids' lives.
That's so cool. Yeah, like a strong male presence in their lives.
Yes.
That's really beautiful. That's awesome. As we start to wind it down, Ryan, this phrase "at home," I'm curious what is conjured up for you when we look at our three arenas here in Your Other Brothers: faith, sexuality, and masculinity. I wanted to, if you're okay with this, jumping straight to sexuality, if that's okay.
Yep.
Because you mentioned at the top of the episode that you used to be affirming and that you used to have a boyfriend that you lived with, and so I'm just curious from that standpoint, and then also where you are now. Like, do you feel comfortable? Do you feel like you've reached a place of I don't know, contentment, peace with your sexuality, with where you are? Is there still part of you that longs for that, to have that boyfriend or to have that romantic person in your life, in your home?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Great questions there. So I guess I'd like to first start off by saying that while in practice, when I was in a long-term relationship with this guy, yes, in technical terms, I was affirming. That being said, I wasn't outwardly so. It was that an internal conflict the entire time was raging in my soul, that I never had rest over. I think I had reached that point in the early 2000s, more mid 2000s, of just like out of like, well, this whole ex-gay thing doesn't work. I never went through any conversion therapy because in my mind it was all a hoax. And I was like, if God's going to answer prayers, like I don't need to go through someone else. He'll heal me if this is his will. And God, what in my mind I needed healing from, he never ended up healing me that way, i.e. changing me from same-sex attracted to straight. And so not seeing any other option in the church at the time between ex-gay, which didn't fit with any practice I could maintain, then I may as well just out of frustration go for it and just, don't need to say anything. Don't ask, don't tell. And that was all the rage for the US for many years. And like, I just went along with it. But like I said, like I was constantly in this like internal turmoil of like, am I doing the right thing? Like, I'm not at peace over this. So, I'd say when I went through the process in 2020, God had me alone at my worst mental health point in many years. I thought I was losing my mind in the pandemic, but that's when I heard God's voice the clearest, and where he really revealed how much he loved me, and he just wanted me to stop trying to fix it myself. He just wanted me to rest in his embrace of love, and he was going to show me a path forward. And it was like I was struggling to the last minute of like, I can figure this out myself. I can do it. Because I'd almost built myself this pride of like, I don't need anyone's help. I don't need to talk to anyone about this. It's too complicated for people to understand. And I think through a very special moment in 2020, God showed me that because it wasn't physical. I wasn't even seeing any human soul. And yet Jesus loved on me so intensely that I'm like, you really are all I ever will need in life. And my only reason to be here is to serve you. I don't know what this means in terms of becoming celibate, but I trust you that you are going to meet my actual needs, not necessarily the stuff that would be nice to have, but that's not God's will. But my actual needs, he was going to meet all of them. He actually did. It was around that same time that, like, I'd say up until 2020, from the point of puberty till that point, I was, in my mind, needing to be healed, and I didn't want to talk to anyone about it. But I was going to pray for God to make me straight. In my mind, that's how Christians like me get healed. And God showed me that he just wanted me to be his. And through me submitting to be his, he would make me holy. I didn't need to be a heterosexual for that to happen. And so, yeah, I no longer ever again attempt to pray away the gay. And I am a lot more comfortable in my own skin. The mere fact that I guess it was last year, Easter, I shared my testimony with my church that was broadcast on all their campuses and all their services.
Wow.
And never in a million years did I thought I would ever share that part of my life, specifically in church and specifically to an audience that I don't have control over, knowing who's watching it now. And I think, like, yeah, even doing this podcast with you today is kind of a step in faith in the same direction of 5 years ago, I would have never had the courage to do something like this and speak openly about it. And yet that's just a testament of how much God truly has healed me, that I am comfortable where God has placed me. And I do feel home in my sexuality today like I never have before. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I mean, you shared the link with us on our Discord, and you've mentioned it a couple times on Zoom calls in the community. And so it's really cool to see. We've had quite a few guys in our community have similar things like that, where they had a video that they shared, or they were able to like speak at their church for 5 or 10 minutes with a microphone. And I just always love it when those moments happen in our community. It's not the be all end all, as if like if you don't do that you're doing something wrong and God's not using you, because everyone's got a specific journey. But I specifically remember being at a conference years and years and years ago, and just hearing people at this conference take the microphone. It was a night of spontaneous, just like story sharing, and everybody just can share if they want to. About what God's doing with your faith and with your sexuality. And there was so much in me that wanted to like be brave and wanted to be bold and wanted to be courageous and like stand up and take a microphone and just like share for a couple minutes, whatever would come out of my mouth. But I just was like, you know what? I had this, and I'm proud of myself because I had this moment where I was just like, I want to, but I just don't think I'm ready. I don't think this is the right time. This is all still very new for me, piecing all of this together. And that was 4 years before I wrote my first book. And so basically for 4 years, there was this journey of like gathering that courage and understanding myself better and bringing other people into my life. That was a big part of it, was like bringing more people into my life. And then I reached a point where, again, not the path for everybody, but I came out to the world through a book, through a memoir, and it's been such a blessing to have it out there. But it's also been one of those things that you can't take back. Similar to you, like there's no control with the audience. Like I have no idea who's going to come across this book or learn things about me that I haven't told some of my closest friends, or, it's just some of those things are out of your control, and there can be a sense of tension and losing that control, but also a sweet surrender too. I mean, as cliche as that sounds from a Christian standpoint, but just to let go of it and just be like, you know what, God's going to do whatever he wants with it and lead people to it, the right people to it, hopefully, at the right times in their lives. And I'm confident that the same will be true of you, both from that Easter video and then also this podcast and anything else you do in the future, putting your story out there. It's just, it's a blessing to see people step into courage wherever that leads, whatever that means for you. So thanks for just being a testament to what God is doing. It's really cool. It's really awesome and inspiring.
Thank you. Your story is very inspiring as well. And
Thanks,
it's an
brother.
honor to be journeying this path with you the last 4 years.
Yeah. Faith and sexuality, that is what we kind of covered just now. But masculinity, where do you feel at home in your masculinity, or how at home do you feel in your masculinity?
Great question.
This one always gets the most response from people. I feel like this is the one that make people really have to think about it. Like, How manly do I feel right now?
Um, I would say it's a continual journey for me, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I am more comfortable. I'm feeling more at home with how I define my evolving view of masculinity. Like it's continued to evolve. Um, having, yeah, seen the whole world changing in the 80s, 90s, and now everything since Y2K. And I don't know where masculinity is even going from here. But I'd say at this stage of life, given what a very non clearly defined definition of what masculinity is, I mean, it's, I think, a very subjective to a lot of people. And yeah, perhaps I've always, maybe in the past, wondered if I'm masculine enough, or if I'm, God forbid, if somebody could assume my sexuality because of my mannerisms or how I talk. I think I used to be a lot more self-conscious of that. And I'd say over the years of meeting so many more men that might be straight and yet have a lot more effeminate outward mannerisms than I ever had. And also meeting like most of macho men who actually preferred men, not women. And so, yeah, I think that definition of masculinity can change from person to person and in different contexts. But I would say in my acceptance, how God made me as a man and how I am as a man pursuing God, I'm way more comfortable in my perception of my own masculinity, resting and assured that I'm God, He's my Father, I follow His Son, and Jesus, in my point of view, is the epitome of what masculinity is and should be.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a very intimate, loving person. And I think still to this day, like one of my favorite passages in the Bible is when the beloved, which we assume to be John, rests his head on Jesus' bosom. I just think that's the most beautiful thing ever.
And he didn't push him away and say no homo or anything like that.
And in front of everyone.
In front of everybody. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty remarkable. Yeah. Yeah. It's sometimes hard to define. Like if you're just to define masculinity in a sentence, like it's hard for me to think about how I would define it. But I think some combination of like living by the fruit of the spirit as a man, and then essentially like if I'm looking for a person to model my masculinity after, then yes, I would want that person to be first and foremost Jesus in his humanity. And you're right, just the inclusion and the love, the empathy, the power that he spoke from, his knowing his identity and from where he spoke. I mean, I think all of that can be part of masculinity. And I'd like to think here in YOB, we're blazing a trail. We're blazing maybe a new trail for a lot of people as far as what does a masculine man look like? Because it could look like what you think it looks like from culture, from a lot of different things, but it could also look like someone who loves memes and someone who does lots of other things that our community is known for. So there's room for lots of different types of men across this masculinity spectrum. And so I'm just grateful for you, grateful for everyone listening for being a part of it. Because I'm constantly inspired by all the different stripes of masculinity in our midst. Ryan, it was a delight to have you here today from the other side of Canada. So much fun. I'm so glad we were able to make this work.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been awesome chatting with you, and we'll see what happens from here.
Yeah, absolutely. Listeners, if you want to comment on this episode, go over to our podcast episode page, yourotherbrothers.com/podcast. Find Ryan's episode about living with his brother and tell us a story. If you live with your sibling or a group of siblings, or if you think you might one day, what the prospect of that would look like. Tell us a story, ask us some questions. We'd love to hear from you about sibling life so interesting. I'm so glad we were able to bring you into this conversation. And maybe in the future, Ryan, we can chat again someday. Certainly, maybe one day I can visit you in that aforementioned fairy tale village of Lillooet and see your turquoise lakes and enjoy a bountiful meal, all the things. I hope to experience that one day with you.
Yeah.
Well, it was a joy to have you. I hope you'll be back. And listeners, stay tuned. We've got a couple more episodes left. We are winding this thing down as summer turns to fall, as you feel a little chill in the air wherever you are, unless you're south of the equator and things are opposite. I'm not accounting for you all. But otherwise, as summer turns to fall, as we wind this thing down, just looking forward to closing it out soon, enjoying all these beautiful stories. Thanks to you, Ryan, and y'all. Until we gather at home once again.
When I'm with you, I feel like I'm already home.
Whenever you followed a fairy tale, I think of Lilliput instead of Lillooet.
Oh, Lilliput. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
But I
like
love
the
it.
Lilliputians.
I love it. Yeah.
Absolutely.